Hey guys, let's get started with our React Native course. So without any further ado, let's start writing the code, right? So the first and the foremost thing is how do we create a React Native application? So it's pretty straightforward. You write the command npx react native init for initializing, and let's call it test tab, right? Once you give enter, you can see that it's going to download a template, and also it will install a bunch of dependencies. Okay, now since it's asking you want to use Cocoa Pods, I'll say yes by clicking Y. Our project has been initialized. Let's write code and okay, awesome. So as you can see that we have our project initialized. Let's quickly try to understand what is there in our project directory. So the first and the foremost thing for any JavaScript project is we have something called as package.json, where we have all the configurations related to our project, JavaScript project. So we can see that we have dependencies. The two major dependencies are React and React Native. And then we have another set of dependencies which are called as dev dependencies. These dependencies help us to build a React or for that matter JavaScript project. The specified version of Node is something greater than or equivalent to 18. We have Yarn as the package manager. The name of the application is test app, and we have bunch of already added scripts, that is Android, iOS, lint, start, and test, right? So if you run npm run Android, it will spin up an Android emulator or simulator, whatever you want to call, and it will install that application. So this is our package.json. The next most important file is index.js, right? So what is index.js? In any JavaScript project, index.js is generally considered as the entry point of the application, right? So you can see we are only calling one function, that is register component, right? And it is coming from uh, the package app registry, which is essentially coming from the library React Native, right? So what is this component? This is, you are telling to the compiler that okay, this is the entry level component, and if you see the arguments it expects is the app key, that is the app name, and the component, the entry level component. So the entry level component is app, which is defined in app.tsx, and app name is something which you can find, it's present in app.json, and it was already created by the React Native template. The name which you gave as the name while initializing the project, the same name is used here. Now one thing we have to understand, it cannot be any random name. I'll get back to on where this name is used. So let's move on with the other files, right? We have the app.tsx. It's a typical React component file, right? So you can see that there is a function which you have defined, and since this is a TypeScript file, so we have defined the return type. Okay, what is this? And then essentially what we are doing is we are returning a JSX. Now people coming from React world, this thing may look very similar, but at the same time it will look very different also, because we are not using HTML components like div or br or you know, god knows, right, input and all. We have some different set of component, we'll be discussing that. But yeah, let's just remember we have the app component and we are exporting the app. The same component which is exported we are using in the register component. This is the entry level to the Java to the React specific code. And now once we have seen app.tsx, let's dive into other files. We have a test file. It's a pretty typical React kind of test file, that okay, you are saying okay if it's rendering correctly or not. So we'll go to the other directories. Now we also have node modules, and people from JavaScript world will obviously know what's node module. If you open package.json, and whenever you run the, and if you also open the terminal, let me quickly shrink other things which is not needed. Whenever you run npm install what is going to happen, it will, this particular command, once executed, it will try to find package.json in the root directory wherever you are running this command. And if it encounters a package.json, it will look for the key dependencies, and whatever is present inside the dependency, it will start installing. Same it will do for the dev dependencies as well. And also, along with these two dependencies and all of these dependencies, these particular libraries also have their own dependency, right? So it will install them also, and the same you can find in node modules, something which we are not going to deep dive. It's actually not needed. Now the other thing is the two most important directory which we may not be touching very often in the very beginning of React Native courses, but yeah, this is something which you need to understand if you have to become a full-fledged mobile developer. Even though you're going to use React Native, you have to understand the importance and significance of these two files. So let's quickly look into the Android directory first. So the first and the foremost thing is, in Android directory we have bunch of subdirectories and bunch of files, right? So if you open setting.gradle, right, there are a bunch of configuration here. If you open gradle.properties, this is something which you can consider like, I'll not really say it's like env file, but yeah, okay, something similar to what we have .env. So we are defining a bunch of things. Is Hermes enabled? Okay, is new architecture enabled? And you know the other things. We will discuss all of these in depth later, but let's not talk about it right now. And we have one more thing, that is build.gradle. So basically this file has the configuration of what configuration has to be used in order to build an Android application. You can see, okay, we have minimum SDK version, compile SDK version, target SDK version, NDK version, Kotlin version. Oh my god. Okay, what are these, right? So basically SDK version is nothing but the Android API you are targeting. And when I say Android API, it's basically Android operating system you're trying to target, right? But you may ask, right, what is this 23? There's no Android 23. The latest right now is 15, or we are currently using 14. But the way Google has defined the operating system, from a developer point of view, they generally talk in terms of like these big numbers, right? So I'm not sure, but I think minimum version SDK, minimum SDK version 23 will be somewhere like, if I'm not wrong, Lollipop, and the compile SDK version probably will be the Android 14, and NDK is something which we'll not discuss right now. It's probably not even needed. And then we have Kotlin version. So again, you know, right, Android code can be written, Android applications, native Android applications can be made using Java or Kotlin, right? So we are just specifying, okay, if you encounter any Kotlin code, take a compiler of Kotlin having this version and then compile that Kotlin code, right? And then we have other things, other dependencies, something similar what we do in JavaScript side. We do something similar on Android side. These are the dependencies. So you can see that we have a very important dependency, that, okay, React Native Gradle plugin, right, which we have to use. Anyways, let's dive into the important part. We can discuss all of these. So if you expand app, if you expand SRC, you can expand main, and this is a typical way of how how programming languages like Java and all, they keep their directory structure. It's based on the package, right? So if I go to Java, you can see that we have two very important files, main activity.kt and main application.kt. Now I was mentioning that this register component app name cannot be any name. The whatever name you're going to put here, the same name has to be present in the function that you're overriding. Overriding is a concept, it's fine, we don't need to know. It's just see that get main component returns a string. That string is test app, and this and the name you're passing here has to match in the case of Android. Also, if you see, we are also saying, okay, we are overriding one more function where we are just returning the get.js main module name. It is index, and it's not just random, you can just put anything, right? This index is basically trying to point out to this file. So this file is the entry point for the Android. You're just defining it here, and in the main activity.kt you are saying, and the main component name, get main component name, is the test app which you are trying to register with. So let's try to find the same for the iOS. When we expand, we see test app, we go to app delegate.mm. Same thing you can see here, right? You're saying the module name, okay, is the test app, right? The one which you want to pass in the register component. Now the next thing is, if it is a debug, then the file entry level file is index.js. But if it's not a debug, then obviously it's a build. Then for that scenario, there will be a JS bundle which will be spitted out once we compile a build version, right? We'll be discussing more on what is debug and what is build. But yeah, then in that scenario, don't point to the index, but rather point to the JS bundle, right? So we don't have to break our heads. Just few more things I want to show. So there's one file called as info.plist, and this info.plist is the place where you're kind of specifying, right, what is there in the application, right? So the app store will immediately see this file and get to know, okay, what are the permissions that you'll be asking your user to grant, right? So all those things has to be defined here. And if you see, there's a pot file. Pot file is something you can consider something like package.json for iOS, right? Where basically you're trying to define what this project is about, what dependencies it's gonna use. And if we come back to Android, just like info.plist, which was present in iOS, where you were declaring things like permission, something similar we are going to do in Android manifest.xml. If we need to access microphone, we are going to declare here, right? So you can see there's already one permission, that is internet. The app is going to use the internet, so we are just declaring this permission. Similarly, if you want to access the contact, we have to declare it here, right? So that's pretty much it, and I think we are good to start with the actual coding. So let's dive into the coding part, and also we'll see how to spin up the emulator.